Hi, and welcome back. This is Kelly Allen, and today I'll continue reading in my book, The Puzzle, or as I like to say, the Spirit's book, The Puzzle, that I just happened to pen with guidance from Spirit. At any rate, today I will be reading the chapter that I've titled The Power of Forgiveness, and as always, I'll start with a couple of quotes. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. The Buddha. Forgiving is not a gift to someone else. Forgiving is your gift to yourself. A great gift. The gift of happiness. Jonathan Lockwood Huey. The power of forgiveness. Without heading down a road of reminisce and recounting the many obstacles I have faced and the apparent hardships I experienced from early childhood on, I will just say that life often found me trying to reconcile the apparent, quote, unfairness and, quote, injustice of it all, and the, quote, evil that was permitted to exist in this world. There are only a few people who know me well enough to have had me share with them some of my early experiences. Those people tell me they cannot understand how I came to be so, quote, well-adjusted and not bitter and mean. What I've shared with them is another transformative experience that pushed me forward in my connection to Spirit and my understanding of and ability to comprehend and embrace love. Again, without recounting specific experiences that might convey a feeling of trying to glorify the situations in a way that qualifies my experiences as greater than or having more significance than that of another, I'll provide some general information which helps to tell the story and convey its impact. I grew up in a house that most would say calling dysfunctional is an understatement. My father was an alcoholic and ultimately died early at the age of 55 when I was 24 years old. The house was usually filled with turmoil, and peace was not a quality I would ever have attributed to it. Of course, there were moments of happiness. They were, however, usually short-lived and followed by situations that could quickly eradicate the joy from memory. As a family, we lived in the constant fear of what the next moment could and often did deliver. As a young adult, for a number of years, I lived with a resentment and bitterness against my dad that prevented me from experiencing relationships of any kind to their full potential. By allowing bitterness to inhabit my being, I prohibited my ability to connect to Spirit in full capacity. There were incidents in which Spirit worked on me and touched me in a way that caused me to have moments of temporary remembering the potential of divine love. As I journeyed, I walked through most of my young life with blinders, choosing for many years to blame my circumstances on my childhood and early life experiences, proclaiming my lack of empowerment and status as a victim, wearing them as a merit badge of identity and pride. I felt as if no one could understand me and the depth of sorrow I had known, and they had best not dare try. It's no wonder that I gravitated to a church of a, quote, chosen few, with a message that esteemed the teachings of hellfire and damnation far above a message of grace and of love, giving more time and attention to the former rather than the latter. After all, I had not yet opened myself to the fullness of love, and based on the experience I chose to identify with, judgment and consequences most closely matched my state of resonance. Fortunately, my experience and my heart would change for the better. With Spirit working on me as I would study and read the Bible and other spiritual teachings, my inner eyes began to open. The studies of my fundamental years were primarily geared towards reinforcing the ideology of the church to which I belonged. However, I would eventually find myself reading beyond the structured program provided to us and found myself fascinated with many of the actual words of Christ. The more I read and opened myself to understanding the message of Christ, the more it brought the love in it, and the greater my desire became to know more. My prayers became more and more fervent, and my heart became more and more open, allowing Spirit to move and work in me in powerful ways. Gradually removing the blinders I had tightly fastened and discarding the badge of a victim that I wore so proudly. As I shared my story about the visit from the angel in disguise, I would eventually reach the point of non-resistance and allow truth, brotherhood, compassion, and love to open the door of my heart. There was much work to be done in my heart, however. A number of years later, after having left the church that I once believed held my salvation, and many years after my father's passing, I found myself compelled to visit his grave, which I hadn't done since the day of his funeral. I can't explain the compulsion, but I knew it was something I needed to do. I didn't know how long I would stay, what I would do while I was there, or if I would have anything to say. What happened during this visit proved to be another of the most transformative experiences in my life, and one of my greatest visits from Spirit. While standing at my dad's grave and staring at his headstone, I was suddenly overwhelmed with a complete understanding of how I had allowed him to have power over my life from beneath 6 feet of dirt. It suddenly hit me that his influence over me was now totally in my control, and I needed to be liberated of the blame against him and the resentment that I held onto for so long. But how? While initially standing at the grave, the desire to walk away and leave the cemetery almost overtook me. Somehow deep inside I knew I had to take action, but the only action I could come up with was to pray. So that's exactly what I did. Praying for my father was very difficult for me. The church to which I once belonged had convinced me that my father had gone to hell with no hope of salvation. By now I had decided to no longer accept such an idea. But where was he? And how should I pray for him? I began by asking God to give him another chance. I prayed, God, if it's possible and your mercy will allow it, please give my dad the opportunity to redeem himself. This didn't feel right, so I began again. God, if it's possible for you to relieve my dad from the consequences of any actions he took that hurt me, please do so. After many attempts at praying for my father, I finally became overwhelmed with a presence of undeniable love that embraced me and moved me in a way that it seemed my body resonated on even a cellular level, with every molecule in my body trembling. I suddenly began to sob uncontrollably, and I began to speak to my dad in a way that I'll never forget. I said, Dad, I forgive you for any wrongdoing and any hurt you have ever caused me. I forgive you for the scars that I carry in my heart and in my mind. I know you did the best you could with what you were given, and I thank you for having been a good provider. I thank you for the moments you were able to demonstrate your love for me, and I release you of all responsibility and for any guilt you may carry. Dad, I love you, and I wish peace for you. As I prayed, I could feel the understanding that forgiveness and love I was feeling, and the extending. As I prayed, I could feel the understanding that the forgiveness and love I was feeling and extending was the love of God moving in and through me. I was allowing God to forgive through me, through my experience, as me. From the day I visited my father in the cemetery on, I have moved further and further away from the life of a victim. From this time on, my relationships and interaction with others improved. My communications improved. My trust in others grew immensely, and I gained a new sense of self-empowerment. The act of forgiving my father was an act I believed I was doing for him. The reality of it is that this was a moment of transformation, and for me. I became attuned to Spirit in a way that blew my mind, and I gained a deep understanding, or should I say, a remembering of the love of Spirit. Next week, I'll continue the reading of the puzzle, and I'll be reading a chapter that I titled The Inner Child, Recognizing the Child Within. And as always, I really appreciate you joining me. I appreciate you listening, and I hope that, I hope that you're finding meaning and you're finding the information I'm sharing to be helpful or at least entertaining. And I hope you feel the love that I'm trying to infuse in the reading of these chapters. Thank you again, and I will catch you next time.